2 nights ago, in this theatre, the Prince Edward Theatre in the middle of London, the new Tim Rice, Andrew Lloyd Webber musical, Evita, was given its world premiere. It's costing the best part of £500,000. The producer is Robert Stigwood, the stars David Essex, Elaine Page, Joss Ackland, and the director is one of the leading figures in American theatre today, Hal Prince, who is the subject of Alan Benson's film on the South Bank show tonight. Prince's production record includes such musicals as West Side Story, A Funny Thing Happened on the Way to the Forum, Fiddler on the Roof, Cabaret, and A Little Night Music. He served his theatrical apprenticeship with the veteran director George Abbott, and then Prince's career took off in 1954 when, at the age of 23, he co-produced Pajama Game. And 25 years later, he's still one of the youngest producers on Broadway. His latest Broadway show is called On the 20th Century, and that's just won 5 Tony Awards early this month. Prince is both a producer and a director. The producer cares for the business side of the show, the investors' interests, choosing the director, and generally bringing together all the elements that make a production. The director is the interpreter of the piece. He puts it on the stage. As a director, most of Hal Prince's life is spent backstage. And over the last 6 months, we followed him backstage in London during the Evita rehearsal. But we also spent a week with him in New York, where, among other things, he was auditioning for a new musical he's doing with Stephen Sondheim and tending to the problems with his current Broadway hit, working in rooms far removed from the glamour that the public sees. And we've deliberately chosen to stay backstage to show the work that's hidden from us, the public. So this is very much Hal Prince at work, at what he's achieved between Pajama Game and Evita. We first spoke to him last November when he was in London casting Evita.
I mean, every once in a while we get suckered into imposing. People do a form on material, and you can see it right away. You know, you've got to, from inside, you've got to find out how you're going to project that material on a stage. But accepting that, it still has got to surprise people, because they've got in their heads, all those people who've listened to the Evita record have a production of Evita, which is lovely. They're welcome to it, but I'm not in their heads. I'm in mine. And so it's an interesting problem, because you have to satisfy some expectation and yet surprise.
All right, here we go. Come on.
And you can't just take an extremely popular record and put it on a spindle and turn it around on the stage of a West End theater.
Right, you're not seated there at all. Where are you going? Come on, no. You're not. Jesus, come on, somebody with a book, besides me. You're up here, surely, you're up here.
Every word is true.
That's it, all right.
In a London rehearsal room a month ago, Prince directs the very first run-through of the final scene of Evita.
You're playing Kismet. Cheer us up. All right, here we go. You're supposed to be sitting there. Well, just tell her to leave. Because we've got wrong people again. They're off at costumes. Too late now. Now listen, we have stopped. We can't have anybody at costumes when we have a run-through. Now that means that there's a run-through on Friday. There'll be no costume call for anybody during that run-through if it's in the afternoon. All right, go on now, please.
Did you believe in your wildest moments all this would be yours?
Seriously, out of the car,
One always picks
gets to start right away.
One praises fools, one smothers light, one shifts left to right.
Turn. You forgot. Tell us all about power and corruption and go off instead of settling on the bed. You can't settle here if you like for some of it, you know, and I'll get the point, and then turn your back and go up there. That'll save a little bit of time. The other thing is the end of A New Argentina. What are we intending there? Because that doesn't seem right to me. Could you sing it once for me? That's terrific.
Flying a dove, so young, the instant queen, a rich, beautiful thing, of all the talents, a cross between a...
Hold it 1 second. Let me see if it's just a piece of history.
I'm with you.
Better days. Just we want to know what it's just a statement of fact. High flying again. One more time.
High flying. So I can give you a...
Yes, it's just a recollection of history. No sentiment in it at all.
High flying adored, so young.
That's it, George.
The instant queen, a rich, beautiful thing. Of all the talents, a cross between a fantasy of the bedroom and a saint. And you are just a backstreet girl, hustling and
Finish up.
fighting.
Just the last. All right? Come on. Sam, let's go, huh? This room's gonna kill us. Come on. You can add voices in there if you want to, because I've separated them. If you want to add them for any reason. Okay. I mean, I don't mean many. It's just that group over there. All right. Curtain's coming in. Rather, the screen is. And it goes blank. And that's it. All right. My God. Okay.
New York, home of the Broadway musical, where 2 months ago we filmed Prince's last week before he left for London and Evita. We went there to watch him at work and look at the background to his enormous reputation as a producer and director. His current Broadway show, called On the 20th Century, is set on a train.
Broadway's new musical comedy smash. On the 20th century, on the 20th century, on the 20th century, keep on railroad train. On the 20th century, keep on railroad train.
You can see the way that Prince imposes a style on it. It's all done as if it were a 30s movie. Even the acting has that kind of black and white stylization of a 30s movie. All of it is slightly larger than life, slightly stilted, slightly stylized, and there's an overall style to the show which is unmistakable and, in my view, absolutely brilliant.
Spectacular, hilarious, a runaway hit. Madeline Kahn, John Cullum, Imogene Coca on the 20th Century at the St. James Theatre. Phone for tickets now.
The veteran director George Abbott gave Prince his first job in the theatre as an assistant stage manager.
He's 90 now. We still share an office in New York. He's written his first novel, just finished a script for a play that he's going to do, just finished a musical, a libretto, which I read. I mean, that's sort of the par activity for any given year from him. But he's a director. He was a producer until my partner and I came along. He didn't like producing any more than I did, and was very glad to have somebody take over.
When Hal and Bobby Griffith were working for me in the office as assistants, and when we had shows we produced together, I mean, they produced and I directed, I would often want someone to go out on the road and check up on a company that was supposed to be ragged. And I noticed that Hal always got better results than Bobby did. And so I remember telling him that I thought he was a director because of what I saw he had done.
Prince wasn't to direct his first show for another 12 years, but after only 2 years with Abbott, he co-produced his first musical, which Abbott directed.
7.5 cents doesn't buy a hell of a lot. 7.5 cents doesn't mean a thing. But give it to me every hour, 40 hours every week. That's enough for me to be living like a king. I figured it out.
It was about a pajama factory in which there was a union quarrel. It doesn't sound very musical offhand. So I had to be sold on the idea.
I'm intrigued by venues. I'm intrigued where musicals take place. And more often than not, the musicals that I've been involved with have been on subjects that seem unlikely for musicals. I think that's terrific. I think a certain amount of shock value is wonder. Surprise an audience. Audience goes into a theater expecting something. You're in terrible shape because their expectations have formulated pictures in their minds. And no matter what their picture is, it isn't my picture. On the other hand, when you give them a musical which takes place in a pajama factory, you've got no place to go but up.
Following the great success of Pajama Game, Prince used Abbott to direct Damn Yankees, a musical about baseball.
Whatever Lola wants, Lola gets. No use to fight, don't you know you can't.
And then New Girl in Town, adapted from a play by Eugene O'Neill.
No exception to the rule.
In 1957, with 3 successful productions already behind him, it was the 28-year-old Hal Prince whom director Jerome Robbins brought in to produce West Side Story, only 6 weeks before rehearsals were due to begin. This collaboration with Robbins strongly influenced Prince's ideas about musical theatre.
From Jerry Robbins, I learned to prepare, among other things, and a number of other things, because this thing called the concept musical, a terrible term, certainly is something that he was working in. What it simply means is that you have a sort of aesthetic view, a vision which includes the visual elements of the production, you know, the style of the acting. So things that have been true of non-musical theater forever. You know, that makes one Hamlet totally different from another Hamlet. But that, for musicals, was apparently new enough that it became a label.
I think it's legitimate to say that he has made a trademark for himself in musicals. And I suppose at first it looked as though that trademark was Robbins, but to a very large extent that trademark has turned out to be Prince.
What is that trademark?
I would say that it is a conception of the show as a total entity. Everyone talks of conceptual musicals, and I don't know who first coined the phrase. I suspect it might well have been Prince himself. But certainly it is an approach to the musical that might be likened to that of a great ballet director such as Diaghilev, taking all of the elements of the musical and making sure that all of them fit, mesh, and represent some image of the show. It's not a musical in the old musical comedy tradition, where you have some nice music, you have some nice dancing, you throw them all together, big star. It's much more an approach that takes in the total theatrical entity.
It was seamless. You couldn't tell when they were talking, when they were dancing, but they were telling the story, always progressing the story, never stopping. You never had that division. Now they're dancing, or now this dance is illustrating what they were just talking or singing about. Not at all. They started by dancing, as you remember, for 6 or 8 minutes. Then they started to talk, and they started in the talk right where they'd left off in the dancing. Then they sang. Then they started to dance again, and the story never backtracked, and it moved on. That's an enormous contribution.
Tonight, tonight, it all began tonight. I saw you, and the world went away. Tonight, tonight, there's only you tonight. What you are, what you do, what you say. I had a miracle would happen. I know now I was right. For here you are, and what was just a word is a sign.
South Bank Show Part 2, Hal Prince, production number 33144, date recorded the 23rd of June 78, take 1.
There are many people, and a large part of the public, that still thinks that a musical is something you go and relax at the end of a long day at the office. People used to leave West Side Story in droves all the time, because it was not what they wanted a musical to be. And they paid their hard-earned money to relax at the end of the day, and they got a lot of juvenile delinquent ballet dancers, and that was really not their idea of a good time.
Sondheim wrote the lyrics for West Side Story, which was the start of an important collaboration between him and Prince.
Yeah, I met Steve on the opening night of South Pacific, which was 1949. And I had gone to the opening with the Richard Rogerses. their daughter and the Rogerses took me. And he had gone with the Oscar Hammersteins. It was not bad. So when the curtain came down on what was an epic experience, one of the most extraordinary and important evenings, as far as I'm concerned, historically, in the growth of musical theater, the Rogerses and the Hammersteins met in the aisle, and somebody introduced Sondheim and Prince. Kind of swell. Steve doesn't remember the introduction, which is sort of insulting to me, but I remember it vividly.
My memory's vague on that. We just liked each other as people, and I don't remember. I guess our enthusiasms were similar, but I don't really remember. I can certainly remember some disagreements we had. I don't really remember any agreements. I think we just were both eager and both had an idea that the musical theater was just scratching the surface and we could be some of the explorers who would, you know, help make it grow. I think that's what it was about.
Their shared views about the future of musical theatre led in 1961 to their collaboration on A Funny Thing Happened on the Way to the Forum. And more recently, to 4 musicals which included Follies, A Little Night Music, Pacific Overtures, and began with Company.
Producers don't have the brains to interfere with the writing, and I have never had really unpleasant problems with the producer. First of all, most of the time I work with Hal, whose ideas are vastly superior to most other writers. And
in what way?
Well, he's far more imaginative, much more daring, much more creative. He likes to take chances, and he has a sense of the dignity of the musical theater, which most people don't. He does not consider it kind of a nursery offspring of the so-called legitimate theater. He has no condescension to it. He thinks of it as the highest possible form of theater. I happen to agree with him.
Applause for the clowns.
They're finally
First of all, he's the best director of musicals around by far, and he's the only one who has a sense of what the entire evening is about, plus a sense of what a musical number is without being a musician. I would say he has a wonderful sense of the function of music in a show. And though he claims to know less about music than he does, his ear is acute. He also is endlessly creative, and he takes it seriously. Therefore, he's an ideal collaborator, because it's like collaborating with a writer. I always take pads of notepaper in for our preliminary discussions on any show, because what spills out of Hal's mouth is material for 67 songs and 87 scenes.
Prince has always been willing to take a risk. Some haven't paid off, but one which certainly did became the longest-running musical ever on Broadway.
Oh, Lord, you made many, many poor people. I realize, of course, it's no shame to be poor. But it's no great honor either. So what would have been so terrible if I had a small fortune? If I were a rich man, all day long if I were a wealthy man, I wouldn't have to work hard. If I were a rich, idle die.
In the mid-60s, Prince turned his hand more and more to directing. His first major success as a director came in 1966 with Cabaret.
The interesting thing about Cabaret was that here was something which had developed from Christopher Isherwood's stories. I mean, it came from the I Am a Camera by John Van Druten. And one of the interesting things that Prince seemed to do in Cabaret was to go back to the original stories and capture very much that element of decadence, the 30s, the early rise of Hitler, everything that really does come through Isherwood's Berlin Diaries. And it was such a brilliant evocation of style and period.
Willkommen, bienvenue, welcome, Fremde, étranger, stranger, glücklich zu sehen, just wie enchanté, happy to see you, bleibe reste stay, willkommen, bienvenue, welcome, im cabaret, au cabaret, to cabaret.
In Cabaret, the master of ceremonies was played by Joel Grey.
We finally got to work together, and we never saw each other during rehearsal, because he was rehearsing the book, and we were over in another building rehearsing the musical numbers. We didn't see each other for maybe 4 or 5 weeks. And I thought, is this what I came to work with you for? To be totally separate? And we finally put the show together, and that was the time when we really did, in fact, start to cook in terms of the characterization. One day, I was kind of struggling with who this man was and how he performed and what would make him real, how to make it original and how to make this character full without any dialogue was the test at hand. And one day I said I had an idea of how to do it, and I said that I was afraid to do it because it really was, I thought, embarrassing, because what I was remembering and what I was finding in myself was all the really third-rate, terrible, disgusting performance that I'd ever seen. And but I couldn't tell, there's no time to tell anybody that. So you have to put that into yourself. So I went off stage and I came on with that idea, and it was awful. I mean, it was really low. I mean, I felt like all those terrible people. And I came off stage and I was like shaking and almost, sick to my stomach. And Hal came back and said, "That's it." So he knew. He knows what he wants. He's tremendous taste.
While we were in New York, Prince had what is traditionally a director's nightmare. He had to replace the leading lady in 20th Century.
Madeline Kahn's had some problems with her voice. It's a very demanding show in that it's kind of mock opera style, and everybody has great arias, large arias, and she wasn't able to take the ends of numbers, and she was having to edit some of the arrangements, which was bad for the show. So the doctor advised her to stop, and I think we all mutually agreed it was a good idea. There's a girl named Judy Kay, whom I've known for a number of years, who was understudying, who was an extraordinarily talented girl, went into the part. The show is only 9 weeks old. It's a big hit, but it's at a crucial time when when it can't have a star coming and going and missing performances or playing at half energy for whatever reasons, you see. So it could have been very dangerous for the show. Judy went in and the audiences adore her, but something we could have had nothing to do with, because in these days of hyped up media nonsense, you're very suspect when you say, here comes the understudy folks. The truth is she's so bloody good that the critics have come and loved her. Kay is quite definitely in her own right a magnificent performer. She looks like Jean Harlow, which is just right for John Cullum's fantasticated John Barrymore, and she sings like a well-tempered lark. Her personality is not so aggressive as Miss Conn's, yet her acting and her voice are most charming. She has a natural grace. The show itself, Train and All, is maintaining its first night schedule.
Part of Prince's job as a director is to check up on the state of his shows and to give the cast notes about their performances. This is especially important now, as he won't be seeing 20th Century again until he's finished Evita.
Here we go. Oh, this is your note. It's Oscar may be a filthy swine. Never been right. Never ever. It should be, filthy swine is elegant. That's right out of the Somerset Maugham play that you're considering starring in. So Oscar may be a filthy swine. You see. Smith, what's that?
Mr. and Mrs. Smith.
Mr. and Mrs. Smith, to Oliver. You're too late. What's happening is those other people are picking up their cue, so we now have this weird confusion where we look over there because they're talking, and then we get Smith, and we...
So we just throw the Smith in?
Take the Smith in right away. I gave you this the other day. I'm going to quite write it. He says, this is insane. And she says, I know, I know. It's growing megalomania, which is what's funny. You're not megalomaniacal. You just go, I know. And they don't quite get it. It's got to be, I'm so sorry, honey, you were marvelous.
As well as 20th Century running on Broadway and Evita about to start rehearsals in London, Prince was already auditioning for his next musical, Sweeney Todd, another collaboration with Sondheim. Preliminary selections were made before Prince arrived.
Could you wait?
Just wait outside. Just wait. Okay, thanks very much, Marcy. That's all we need just now.
Okay, would you wait? Okay.
I'm sorry I'm late. Where do you want me to sit?
Right here.
The thing is this. The Alice in Wonderland girl, who I am reluctant to put in the show, I have a feeling would take the understudy.
She would.
Well, see, I thought of that on the way over here,
but
and that'd be awfully that'd be an insurance policy.
But let me tell you something. I worked with her yesterday, and you talking.
What were you going to say about the other?
The other one gave a much better reading.
The other girl's from the Fantastics.
That's right.
I'm well aware. She's the least likely to take an understudy.
No, she would.
She would take it.
She would. I'm sorry. I thought you were
Wrong again, Prince. Let's go.
Day after day, she'd sit in the pie shop window reading a Bible and eating me out of house and home. There. Now that's good enough for the first gentleman that comes.
Maggie, that's fine. Can you stick around?
Sure.
All right.
Lordy dog, crazy I may be here. There's a good Lord something to have me with. What ain't got a pot made about more than complaints? Oh, nothing like that.
All right. Will the ladies mind waiting outside for a minute, please? What have I got to hear now? I've got to hear. I have no other parts to hear.
No.
But you just have singers to look at.
So I just have singers to look at.
Singers to look at.
So then in that case, I guess you just better damn well bring in absolutely everybody, and let's put all the girls who read over there, and then everybody else, and we'll divide them up.
That I haven't heard before, that you were just seeing for the first time.
Hell is what they are. And if you've got any sensitivity, they're hell on the people in the theater just as they're hell on the people on the stage. Of course, it's harder on the people on the stage. They've got to produce under awful circumstances. Carol, will you go over there? They come out on stage, supposed to perform right there, full out. But I don't know any other way to do it. And I think I'm probably quite kind. Yes. Would you go over there too, please? All right. Now, the point is this. The point is this, is that at the moment, you can only commit yourself to 5, and the blonde would have to accept the swing at this point. So that should be the 5. Now, I also would like to see those 5 ladies on Friday. I know right now we won't have enough people the day we go into rehearsal to fill the theater. You know, I came in quite prepared to say that we're on the cast. So, Joanna, so that's done.
Further problems confront Prince at a meeting he has with the set designer for another project, this time a Puccini opera, The Girl of the Golden West.
It's interesting. What's happened is that the building now dwarfs the mountain. The question is, could we consider making the units much smaller? You see, on that stage, that enormous stage, those buildings are big. But the opening's big.
It's not big.
It's not
as big
high.
as you think. It's not as big as it's not a very wide.
I've left him with what I want and what he wants. There's been a certain amount of pressure because it's costing a lot, and I get nervous.
Beating me up, you know
Well,
what I'm saying
I'll-
about the money, and I mean, you know, which is much over what they wanted to spend. You know what I'm saying?
I hear that.
Which
That's another
is
subject.
Another subject.
If I want to cut it down, then that should cut down on money.
But
Well, it should.
It's
I
the hill that's costing the money.
I think
So
the store's too big.
Okay, we can cut the store down. Although, you know, for a piece of opera scenery, it's very small. I mean, conventional. And I not that I'm saying we shouldn't. I mean, I'd cut it down easy. That's no
You see,
problem.
because when
had
I
a
start
knife,
to think about using outside and inside and showing this waste, you know, this
I suggested the fucking mountain in the first place. I mean, you know what I mean? You know, because I first thought, you see.
You made a very good case, Gene, for not working the scenery the same way in each act. The problem is, if you can cut down proportionately both these units, raise the mountain, so I get a sense
I can
again
easily
of
cut
the
it down.
isolation of the units in the space, I'll be happy again. It's just that oddly enough, the space thing, I just guarantee you that as you take it away and leave them with that at the end of the thing, you will have lost the point.
Okay, so we try making it smaller.
If you could, in fact, open this thing with just the mountain and dissolve in it. If this could come up from the trap in the floor, you'd be ahead. But this denies the audience's perception of the whole point of the production.
And at the end of this week in New York, he was able to bring Evita to the front of his mind again.
Andrew Lloyd Webber, whom I did not know, except by mail, wrote me and said that he and Tim were writing something based on a new project. Could he come to Spain and visit me? And see whether I thought it might make theatrical material. It was going to be a record. And he came to Spain with some tapes of this project called Evita. And I was fascinated. And we talked about it. That's 3 years ago, I think. It will be 3 summers ago. And I wrote a long letter back of what I thought had to be done for the stage. But I have not really knuckled down, and I don't intend to till I get on the plane to go to London.
I call him a general of the theatre. That is, he has great command, and when you're dealing with a musical of this size, with a cast of 40, 25 musicians, dozens of technical people involved, you need someone who commands enormous respect. You need someone with experience, and he is one of the most experienced directors in the musical theatre. And finally, his great taste and judgment, as seen before in Company Follies and A Little Night Music.
Prince's first task at rehearsals is to introduce himself to the cast and explain how he will interpret the story of Eva Peron, Evita.
First of all, welcome to me, mostly. You've been here a few days. Let me say this, that it's a very short schedule for a very ambitious show. I'm going to work chronologically. Larry will have been pot-shotting around the place with dances, but essentially we'll start with the funeral and go right to the end of the show. It is an opera. And as such, I really would like to have the music out of your hands as early as possible. And as I approach a sequence, it would be very nice. I know you got to lean on it. It's like a crutch where you can roll it up in your hands and hold it and refer to it if absolutely necessary. But it'd be impossible to stage this thing if your faces are buried in sheet music. By the way, Tim O'Brien, Tazina Firth, they're your designers. Essentially, when you come into the theater, this back here is the proscenium, everybody. So orient yourself. This is not the proscenium. This is, in fact, the fourth row of the stalls, and you're in it. If you're in the first couple of rows, you're actually under this mural, which is here. I've described for you where you are. Everything about the theater, in other words, will focus you in and pull the audience in from the rear row of the stalls right into this environment, as it were. There is a semicircle here, which is a light curtain. And sometimes in the course of the evening, there'll be nothing else on the stage other than performers but that light curtain. And if you step through it, you come from nowhere. And if you step through it the other way, you disappear before the audience's eyes. There is a circle here of light as well. There are also lights embedded upstage and down on both sides. It's a very simple, complicated production.
Believe me, all you will see is a girl you once knew, although she's dressed up to the nines. At 6s and 7s with you, I had to let it happen.
Don't Cry for Me, Argentina was a pop song, out of context, sung in every language in the world, with no especial regard for the fact that it was written to illustrate canniness of a woman manipulating her audience. You want to give them something deeper than what they got on the record when they heard it. I think we will.
When I try to explain how I feel,
I have another idea. Why don't you try playing it more to the people who are actually on the stage until you get into it? And this is what we've been waiting for all evening. Almost if you came in late, it would be thrilling. Very tentatively, very hard to say, a little bit more spoken than sung. Ease into the singing. Really what I'm saying is, surprise me by being tentative there, by coming in late. Go ahead and be of height. You don't want me to put you up on a chair, do you?
eh?
You don't want me to put you up on a chair?
No.
I could, you know. I could make it. I'm lying now. I'm fraudulent. I'm going to make it hard. I'm going to make it less easy. And take in just the first people in the first rows. And then, when you get to the ambition, I had to. Then take in the house. Okay, here we go. Good.
You'll think it's strange when I try to explain how I feel, that I still need your love after all that I've done. You won't believe me. All you will see is a girl you once knew, although she's dressed up to the nines. At 6s and 7s with you, I had to let
All right,
it
hold it.
happen.
Hold it. That's terrific. That's much better. Now, another thing is just do the little most awkward thing with the dress. Just, I don't mean, here I am. This is, well, it's not quite a thing. It goes there. It's the 10 million pound dress. Now, the thing is this. If you're looking down at something, what's the end? At 6s and 7s, is that it? 6s and 7s. It's a compulsion. It's ambition. We could all be there if we all had the drive that I have, and we must all have the drive that I have, and then you'll have these gowns, you'll have these jewels. You'll be where I am. All right, once more I had to. Terrific. And you see, you'll be ready to cry. It'll be easy at that point. You love me. And you can even try to. No, it's better. I'm wrong. Better say it. This is it.
Yes, that one.
I'm sorry. Once more, I love you, folks.
I love you and hope you love me. Don't cry for me, Argentina. The truth is, I never left you. All through my wild days, my mad existence, I kept my promise. Don't keep your distance. And as for fortune, and as for fame, I never invited them in. Though it seemed to the world they were all I desired. They are illusions. They are not the solutions they promised to be. The answer was here all the time. I love you and hope you love me.
I love musicals because they're so much more complicated than one set plays. I take a certain amount of comfort in the fact that it's difficult to do this show. I think that's important. I think that there is some relationship between the difficulty I've had doing shows and the results.
This is when they're humming. Okay. I think, I told him to get me the book with the gestures. I think she gesticulated ad nauseum. You know, there's a lot of arm waving went on. Did a lot of that. I don't think you should, but I think you should prepare us by in the last section, which is what I did before you say before the I something seemed like an embrace, seemed like a maternal embrace.
I love you.
Yes, that's right. And you notice what I was doing, don't you? I was saying play. Keep reminding yourself that they're all over the place and that they're down there. It's a speech, so that the more eyes you can lock with, maybe way up there, the more eyes you can lock with in the orchestra, in the stalls, the more people you can get on the front row of the dress circle, the more you can actually make that contact with, the better you'll be. So, but it seemed to me like that was just ready for. Go back just a tiny bit.
Don't cry for me, Argentina. Truth is to say to you. But all you have to do is look at me to know that every word is true.
We're going to turn much later because it works so well. Fine. All right, here we go. Here you go, girl. Now.